Oh, it's not a question though.
Yeah. So shall we move on to the next composer? Raz Island?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that piece, Athanasia. It was great to hear. So hi everyone, I'm Faraz. I'm just gonna drop my score into the chat now so that while I remember, so that it will like load and stuff. A lot of my work recently and in the past like year or so has been to do with the relationship between score, performer, composer, audience, all of the sort of different parts in the kind of transaction almost that is a performance of music. And the piece that I'm going to share with you today is called Some Questions. And I wrote it about a year ago, no, just under like 8 months or something. And it's kind of almost based in some ways on work that I was doing at the same time on my own website. So I created a kind of website with like different kind of bits involved in it, like videos of myself talking and some sort of interactive bits. So there's a survey on the website that I think you can submit it now, but for a while it was impossible to submit. And it was just a survey kind of designed for whoever stumbled upon it to just answer these questions and then think of the answers themselves in their own mind. So I was kind of thinking of this survey on my website as a sort of a score and then a performance that happens inside the heads of the people who answer the survey. So that's kind of where I was coming at with writing this piece, Some Questions. And I'm not sure if any of you have opened the score yet, but it's kind of explores some different ways of notating music and presenting music to players. So it's written for 4 instruments, I think. And basically I gave them all the score, so no one was reading off parts, which is a little bit odd because it was for like clarinet, piano, singer and cello, and the cello strings, 2 of them are detuned, and obviously clarinets in B flat. So it's mostly untransposed, but I think there's a couple of moments where it's transposed. It's kind of up to the player to do what they want with it. It really, as a piece, is kind of an experiment, and the score is kind of a provocation to allow something to happen. So I wasn't really thinking, which is something that I've been exploring a lot of, kind of is a process of transcribing an idea from your brain onto paper and then trying to get someone to match what you had it. And I think that having flexible or sort of slightly open scores where really I'm thinking about how I'm relating to the performer by what I give them, rather than trying something that I now. And then we can have some questions. I think I'll share not from the very beginning of the piece, partly because it's about 8 minutes, which is a bit long, partly because the beginning kind of loops a little bit, and partly because it starts quite quietly. But I've just downloaded a plugin on my browser that should boost the sound a bit, but it might just be a bit like odd. But you know, it's just a recording of a live performance. Let me share screen. Oh, this up here, I'll just show you this quickly first. This is my website, so this isn't just promo, but this is and this is the survey. So this is the kind of aesthetic.
Is it redacted for? No, it's free Why is there so much intro? This is the introduction. Introduction, what is it? What am I obscuring? Any ideas?
Thank you. One other thing that I just remembered, actually, as that was going, sorry, I hope the sound was okay. I was like adjusting the volume at points, but I couldn't remember if it was getting louder or quieter. One of the things that I remembered as well is that a lot of the piece is about the process of making the piece. So the bit that we started on, where some of the text is things like, why is there so much intro? What am I obscuring? Those things are taken from a composition lesson that I had on the piece, where my teacher was like, why is there so much introduction? Like, what is this stuff obscuring? So I just was like, cool, yeah, I have that text, and ignore all of his comments. But the piece changed a lot as a result of that conversation. So yeah, like the text is all derived from the process of creating the piece, pretty much, or just from things that popped into my head as I was going. Does anyone have any questions? And I'll probably come up with other things to say.
Hi, I have a question. First of all, congratulations. And well, I just realized there are two questions actually. The first one is, given that the piece is so heterogeneous, I was wondering if there's like a specific moment that you considered your favorite in the piece. And the second question is, I mean, as you mentioned, the piece was a bit of an experiment, but I think it was a very successful one, both from the point of view of having watched when it was performed, from the point of view of the audience and the performers. They really got into it. It wasn't easy, but they did. And I wonder how you've kept this going, and what of here is something you've been taking forward in your process and your work right now.
Awesome. Yeah, great questions. I'm not sure about a favorite moment. I actually haven't like listened back to that piece for a while, so it was quite nice to like hear it back again with, you know, when you like write a piece and then like a few months later you come back to it and you like realize different things about it. I think I really like the end kind of visually. I think like just watching Adam on the piano, it's quite a nice kind of visual thing. Just that end bit, and obviously the score kind of reflects that with this sort of visual crescendo almost. So I quite like that moment. I don't know that I have a specific favorite moment. In terms of how I've taken it like further onwards in my work, I actually have a specific example, which is something that I'm doing at the moment, which is a piano solo, where I've kind of taken a lot of the aesthetic of the type of score that it is. And in fact, I can share the screen of that briefly. The score for this piano piece is similarly kind of open and I think quite provocative. It's accessed, you go on like a tablet and go on a bit of a web page basically, and it's like a kind of choose your own adventure story. So you have lots of these like options. Let me just quickly share screen. So can you all see this page? Actually, I'll do it like that. Oh no. So yeah, you kind of go through and get all of these pages. And they're sort of similarly designed visually, that there's lots of different things that you can do. There's a couple of choices. And there's a lot of like almost in-jokes between the composer and the performer that like aren't then communicated to the audience. So I mean, this piece is like still in development. These are just spoilers. So I've not quite finished this piece, but the other thing that's going to happen as part of this piece, so it's going to have the score that the pianist sees, and I'm also going to create like an audience score almost, which will be like a similar kind of thing, but program notes. I've not even talked about program notes yet, but like I think program notes are really important to think about, and titles as well, because they're kind of framing basically for what happens sonically or visually within the piece. So this piece that I'm writing at the moment, the piano piece, has got or will have an audience score that is similarly accessed on your phone or something, and you like click through different options. So I think that's where I am at the moment with this type of exploration. Yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question related to that actually. Would you mind like sharing your school so everyone can see it, because it is really interesting.
Yeah.
And I feel like that might be lost for like people in the video that might not understand. To an
Oh, sure, yeah.
I have also a question about it. So I was wondering, there are like, the score is absolutely fascinating, and it like shows another dimension to the composition, like the experience of the performers, as I see it. And
Yeah.
I was just wondering, considering the listeners would have no awareness of what's going on in the actual score, how much of it did you want to come across to the audience? So what kind of things would you prioritize in that? Like, I mean, because I know you made it quite open, but I was just wondering, did you have any things that you really wanted to come out and to be heard specifically?
Yeah, I think this question is kind of like what I'm thinking about in all of my work at the moment, and I don't have a specific answer for lots of it, but I think fundamentally where I'm at the moment is that I don't mind if the audience doesn't. I don't mind that the audience has a different experience of the piece than the performers. Because I think that generally an audience doesn't have the same experience of any piece as the performers, because, you know, whether that's playing like Beethoven and you in the second violins have like a little comment on your sheet music that the person who hired the music last wrote on it, like that's a very kind of individual kind of relationship that you're going to have with the score and with someone else who's played it, that the audience is never going to get. However, I do think that the things that we put in a score as composers are really important. And we kind of know this because, like, you know, if you write anything like, you know, you even like GCSE compositions, you're told to put like your little thing at the beginning, like whether you want it to be joyful or like heavy or whatever. Like these things are communicated in some way in the performance of the piece. I think that the main things that I like to think come across, or that I want to come across, one example of something that I want to come across is instability. So the cello specifically, two of the strings are detuned, like quite far, not super far, but so you've got the C string and the D string, like detuned down, which means that they'll not be like possible really to be completely in tune throughout playing. And it's not sort of like very emphatically discussed throughout the piece, but there are moments where like these harmonics won't be in tune, I think. And there's a bit at the end which is like a quote from some Bach or something like that, that's just not ever going to be, that's just going to be very unstable. And I think that visually in the score we see a lot of instability, because the whole of the score pretty much is designed by music that I've notated in Sibelius and then screenshot, brought into Microsoft Paint, and then messed around with there, which is why you still have the notes which are out of the range of the instrument being like red, like this one. And like Microsoft Paint as a kind of as a type of software for editing visual things, images and stuff, is destructive immediately. Like the second you resize something in Paint, it just gets like horrible. So I mean, you know, these notes are not like nice to look at, but I think that is like an element of instability that we have visually as performers, you see that instability, and then through the kind of scordatura and through like, I think through probably the interpretation of the unstable element of the score, maybe it will sound unstable. That's really unstable. Maybe that's a good answer. I don't know. It's an answer. But I think there's a lot of like dark, strong, thick, like coffee made out of gravy and cement. Like, what does that really mean? It's just kind of weird. And I think that the performer will just be like, yeah, that's kind of weird, but they also, it does kind of make sense, because not that you would want to drink coffee made out of cement and gravy, but you can kind of understand those textures. And it's just a kind of extension of metaphor, which I think sheet music always, we have so much metaphor and we don't acknowledge the fact that we fill it with these like metaphors because they're so ingrained in the vocabulary that we're used to. Like one example that I always come back to is pesante, which is so commonly like put in like sheet music, and everyone kind of knows what it means, like heavy. And you know, you can think about it in like bow pressure, and you can think about it in terms of like breath. But can music sound heavy? Not really. Like, it sounds like things that we associate with heaviness. And it's the same with kind of all of these different words that we might include. So I think that I just want to expand that a bit, and just, I don't know, in some ways I'm just taking it to a sort of silly extent, but I'm kind of fine with that. Because I think silliness is also important. And then also all of this piano stuff, when there's pictures of the train, this picture of a train, loads of the piano music is slightly derived from the Thomas the Tank Engine introduction bit, where it's like so that's all of this stuff. And then there's a picture of a train, which like maybe you'd get if you had recently like had a child who watched the old Thomas the Tank Engine before they changed the theme tune, which is another rant I'm not going to go on. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm just talking. Does anyone have any other questions?
Does someone should I read out? I'll read out Ronnie's comment. He says, I can't use the mic. Great piece, congratulations. A bit of a weird question, but I wanted to ask about the character of the piece in relation to the ideas you're exploring. I found it mostly absurdly funny and sublime, among other things. Absurd, I suppose. Is that how you see this relationship between the performers, the score, the composer, and the audience, or whatever the things you mentioned at the beginning?
Yeah, so I do think that like this absurd and funny, like the humor is something that I think is really nice to just play with a bit. And yeah, I think like it is definitely, it has this kind of like absurd stuff going on throughout. I think something that I kind of, I don't know if it's important, but I think that it's also sort of quite authentic. Like, it's not that I've spent a long time thinking through how can I like make a page look funny. It's like I just sort of allow my brain to just be like, okay, like let's just do this, let's do this, let's do this. And so it's a very kind of stream of consciousness kind of writing, which I think ends up being quite absurd. And I don't think I have a specific answer for how it relates, or if it's important that it's funny rather than like serious, in terms of this relationship between composer and performer. Because I think that you can take things from it that are more serious. Like, I mean, this page, for example, in some ways, like, you know, if you look at the text that the soprano's singing, it's, have you ever looked at a goat, looked it straight in the eye, in its goatee eyes, and seen the devil, which is just kind of a bit odd, but it's all scribbled out. But then if you look at the other bits, all of this scribbled out stuff, it's about like, you know, you can't hear anything over the sounds of the words and the lights. And it's, when I was like creating it, I was thinking about the sort of experience of being in like a horribly busy train station or something. And then there's a picture of a train as well, but like in like a very, very busy crowd, and you can't hear anything, and there's just like noises everywhere. So it's kind of, it's got an element of that like actually kind of sincerity and like a genuine experience that isn't like funny necessarily. But I think it just depends on how you interpret it. But there's an element of the fact that it's just absurd because it's not how you expect music to look, and that has a kind of humor in it, and it's got like silly drawings and stuff. So I think you can take a lot of different things out of it. And I think that I quite like saturating scores and pages with text and with stuff, so to the point that you wouldn't really be able to read it all and react to it all in real time, because it just means that there's an element of freshness that, for example, like on the second performance, a performer might notice a different one of these like bits of text, or like might just tune into different bits and like find different things from it. That was quite a rambly answer. I don't know if that was. Oh, you like the train? Thank you. It's also like about 2 years ago, I just had this kind of little conversation with myself. I didn't have a conversation. I had this decision, like realization, that I felt like I'd spent a lot of time writing music in the way that I felt like people expected music to be written, or expected me to be writing music, and I didn't feel like I was structuring things in a way that actually satisfied me. Like I kind of, I think that I felt like I should be writing music that has like a cohesive arc or like good like structure, and like there's definitely a place for that, and I still do that quite a lot. But I kind of like playing around with having different types of like structures and like passageways through a piece. So this is very much just written in a, I think I pretty much wrote it in like, not in real time, but I went through it very quickly, and was like, okay, after this page, I want this page, I want this page. So it's not thought of as a like overarching thing. And I think that a lot of pieces, since I made this decision to stop doing structure how I was expected to do structure, I find that I am much more like, or that I just enjoy the pacing of my own work in a way that I sort of didn't previously. I think I just didn't really get it when it was like, when I was thinking of it in terms of, oh, this is the development of this, and this is like a return to this bit. And I think that can work for some people, but I just didn't really enjoy that very much.
We have an interesting question from Lawrence Stiggs. Is the score a separate piece of art? If so, does it have a name? A title, presumably.
I don't think it's a separate piece of art. I think there's two ways of looking at it. One would be that, yes, it's a separate piece of art, and it's completely separate to the final performance, so that the performance is a sonic thing, or if you're there in person, it's a kind of sonic and like visual thing, and that experience is a piece of art that's kind of encapsulated. And maybe if you watch it on YouTube, that's another thing. I think there's lots of ways of dividing up art, and especially when it's like art experiences, which I would argue music and theatre and stuff are defined a lot by the kind of experience and the way that they are received. So I talk a lot about paratext, and I think a lot about paratext, but I think that it's very hard to divorce a piece of art, especially a piece of like art that exists in time, so music, theatre, there's video, stuff like that, from the stuff that's around it. So in a sense, like this conversation now, or like this presentation now, is another piece of art. If you take it like that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I have a question that kind of links with that, which is one thing that I noticed like straight away that like struck me as really fascinating is the levels of communication that go on in this piece, kind of like what you were saying about the different relationships. And I appreciate the fact that the listener is meant to have a different experience from the performers. I find that great. I think that's very real and very true, like it's very authentic. But I was just wondering, in your composition process, whether you kind of try to synchronize somehow those different experiences, whether whether you were trying to craft it all together to become like a complete work, but somehow still have that, separate kind of distinction between the two.
I think that I don't. I think that I'm not specifically trying to craft something. I think that I'm trying to, or at least, I think I'm trying to craft some things, but I'm not trying to craft the end experience necessarily. What I'm trying to do is create like almost like signposts and like I don't know, a map and like a rule book perhaps for navigating the experience that exists. And I think that the score is a part of that the performers access and interact with and like use. And I think that then the audience will get a different kind of set of materials with which to navigate the experience, which will include, if they get given a program, if there's program notes. I think this piece does have program notes, actually. I thought about reading them out and I forgot. And the audience also might be able to even glimpse bits of the score. Like sometimes if you're sitting close to the front of the auditorium, you can see the music that people are reading off. So I think that there's all of these different things, but I'm not trying to presuppose that I can influence people enough to have like a specific goal that they're going to get out of it. But I think that all of these, like to go back to what I was saying before, that I think that there's loads of different ways of interacting with it, and you could draw lines between them and say this is one bit of art, this is a different bit of art. But I think that the score and the piece and even like the rehearsals and the conversations that I might have with the conductor or the instrumentalists or even audience members after a concert or whatever, I think that they're all part of the same overall piece of art, which different people may have different amounts of access to.
My question was more about whether you intended there to be some sort of overlap, like bearing in mind that obviously there is a different experience on both sides, but like for instance, like you were saying, how the audience might have like separate materials that will help them to sort of maybe understand what's going on like in another way, but was there some kind of overlap that you wanted to have to achieve in ideally?
I think there is definitely overlap. I mean, one of the main ways in this piece especially is that there's a lot of text, and the audience will hear some of it and not hear some of it, but also bits that the audience won't hear will be bits that the singer can't read either. But I think there's quite a lot of overlap, therefore, I think that there can be a lot of overlap between between different types of listening to or reading the music, or looking at the score. But I also think that I think I'm kind of just going a bit further than scores that we're more used to, because if you think about like any other piece of like classical music where a performer has a score and the audience is listening to it, there's also a difference in experience there, but there's a lot of overlap. So I think that there is a lot of overlap, but I wouldn't necessarily be certain enough to say exactly where that overlap is in any given performance. Sorry, I've just seen another question in the chat, which is, will musicians need some training to understand how you're communicating? If not, how will they come to understand how you write and what you are trying to communicate? Which is a good question. I don't think that they necessarily would need training. I think that a group of, I mean, I was very lucky to be able to work with players from the Riot Ensemble who are, have experience in playing new music, and therefore weren't particularly fazed by quite an open and sort of weird looking score. I think if I gave this to people who weren't so familiar with it, they would probably have a much more reluctant interpretation. I do think that the piece, like I had about half an hour rehearsal. I think it would benefit from a longer amount of like discussion between me and the players, but it isn't necessary. I know that the players also looked at it in their own time, like outside of when I wasn't there. I don't think that they necessarily need specific training. I think that there's a lot inside the score itself that tells you how to perform it. I think it just takes a slight like removing yourself from the expectation, or from what you expect from an ordinary bit of music, and because you just have to approach it from a slightly different angle. Like there's dynamics, there's stuff about pacing, but there's like also other visual things, like where it gets worse quality and glitchier, maybe you need to perform with a different kind of tone and a glitchier type of sound. But I don't think that's particularly like, I don't think that needs specific training.
I think Ronnie has a question, right?
Yeah, I can ask it now with my microphone. I've got actually about 3 questions. Hope they're very short and yes and no answers, if that's all right. Just more for confirmation. I was just got the feeling that the most consistent thing that sort of goes through the whole process of your idea and your composition and sound and what happens is that the character seems to be like I don't see something very clear and ordered on the page, and then that turns into something that sounds absurd, and I don't see something absurd that eventually sounds kind of very ordered. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. There's a cohesion between the two things. So
like the effect that comes to the listener and what the performers are doing and what they're thinking, and that seems to be kind of because I might expect in this whole process of the message of like Chinese whispers that eventually at the end you get something completely different in the character. But the musical nature of the thing, I feel it's quite consistent all the way through. Yeah.
It's a little bit of the kind of the medium is the message kind of concept, because sometimes you get music like sheet music that's like very beautifully notated and it looks wonderful, but the actual sonic effects is intended to be like chaos, and it's kind of weird that they don't match up. So I suppose it's kind of doing the opposite.
Yes. Yeah, I found that really interesting. What's the other thing I wanted to ask? It's gone now. It might come in a second. Well, yeah, I'll ask a third question because I remember that. I'm just wondering in terms of practical things with the ensemble. I mean, you worked with an excellent ensemble, but was how did it work in rehearsals? Did you need a lot of rehearsals to get this to be something that they were happy with stepping on the stage and performing? And you?
So I'm not. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure exactly how much time they spent on it without me. I think probably about half an hour. We had a rehearsal on the day basically, which was about half an hour, maybe 40 minutes or something. The main decisions that they'd made were to do with practically that they were going to have a conductor who was going to basically beat through it and signal clearly when they were turning the page. I think it's an interesting piece in one way, which is that the duration is not particularly specified. They wanted the piece to be like 8 minutes or something for the concert, so it was about that long, but you could spend a lot longer on each of the pages. I think that they individually made some decisions on the performance and the kind of character and attitude they were going to bring to it, but I don't think that it took actually that long to put together. One of the reasons for this is probably that they weren't super precious about the pitches. So like a lot of the soprano stuff is like, it's got like quarter tones and stuff and it's really complex. But if you step back and accept that that is maybe just a suggestion, I like to describe sheet music as a serving suggestion. So I think that if you think of it like that, then there's not so much pressure on the rehearsals.
Right, very nice. I remember the second question. I got the impression that you wrote this in a reaction to yourself, in terms of that you wanted to that you've had these ways of working with like, I don't know, structures and plans and all this that has generally been taught to you. Do you often write like that? Because it's something that I've noticed I do. Like if I write a really crazy piece, I might write a sort of more sane piece or things like that.
Yeah, I definitely like change the kind of way that I'm writing and the approach that I'm taking from, you know, piece to piece. I think that with this, it was sort of right at the end of when I was studying, so I kind of had quite a good opportunity to not be worried about writing it for like a commission, or like I'm writing a piece at the moment for a youth orchestra, which is a very specific kind of challenge, and like I probably wouldn't want to like do something completely wild that would like, you know, alienate children. But yeah, I think it was a kind of reaction to how I was thinking about music, and also just a challenge to myself to just try and do something a bit different to the other pieces that I'd written that year. But I think I do this quite a lot. Like I was talking about the piano piece and shared that that I'm writing at the moment, which is a similar kind of reaction to the way that I'm used to perhaps notating, and it's also an extension of this piece, I think, in a way. Like it's another exploration of the same sorts of things.
That's great. It's great to sort of take things up a little bit and then loosen a little bit of what you've always been doing. I really like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we have a question from Matt.
Yeah, that's a rather technical question. The cello player, since this instrument is not in the tune that he or she would expect, does the cello player actually know what he's playing, or she? Does he know what notes come out of the music he performs? Do you?
I think that I don't really mind. I generally am like, in all of my work, like even the more traditionally notated things, I'm a lot more fussed, or like I care a lot more about contour than pitch. So if something's like a few notes out but sort of follows the same vibe and the same like shape, I don't really mind. I think that there are bits where, like this bit on the cello where it's a gliss from B flat to B flat, it's all written at concert pitch, I think, or you know, it can be. I think it says this score is in C at some point in the piece. So they will be aiming for the notes that are on the page. We did have a conversation about this, like I had a conversation with this about the cellist, that she was quite like, she was asking about like what I wanted and whether I should have written the transposed version so that she could like play it on the thing. But I think I didn't transpose the clarinet part, I don't think. So it would have felt a bit weird to transpose the cello part as well. There's only really one page where the cello part is like specifically pitchy, which is like this end bit, where it's got loads of chords, but it's really difficult to play, like triple stopping. Although I think it's just about possible. So yeah, I think that they probably have an idea of what notes they're meant to be playing. But I think similarly to the soprano part, which is really difficult to pitch, if they're going for them and if they're aiming for those pitches, it's almost more like aspirationally pitched rather than like specifically like dictated.
Okay.
Interesting.
By the way, I love your piece. It's totally mind blowing, and it's a firework of creativity, and it's great. It's very
thank you.
Very inspiring. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I think we're going to have to wrap up now. But thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to thank all the composers and of course the performers that played in their compositions, even if they're not here. It was an absolute pleasure and honor to hear from you. And thanks to and thanks to everyone who came. It's really great to have lots of discussion. Like the more people that come, the more interesting the discussion gets. So thank you so much. So our next forum, we're planning to, correct me if I'm wrong, Atafeh, but we're planning to do it in May, is that right? Yeah. So we're going to skip a month because we have a lot of work on funding to do. So it's going to be on May, and it's going to be a special forum, which is called Music in the Making, and it's going to give composers the opportunity to present something that they're currently working on. So it could be either something that they've worked on already, that's a complete composition, but they haven't had a chance to have it recorded or performed, and they're in the process of looking for performers. So it's a bit like a panel, an open panel, where you can just present work that you're either working on, projects that you want to do and you need someone to collaborate with, or you're looking for performers, things like that. Because it's sometimes like the process of composition is the fascinating thing itself. So it would be really interesting also to hear from people that are currently working on something and just be able to ask them questions and learn from them, and maybe even get involved in their work. So if you're interested in that, please do get in touch. I'm going to post our email address here. Did we have a question?
No, I'm doing that earlier. I don't know.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, great. Yeah, so please get in touch. If you have any feedback about the forum, that's also really great. Yeah, and so if you want to get involved, it's open to everyone. So thank you so much for coming. Have a lovely month and a lovely evening. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. See you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.